General Hospital spoilers for Monday, June 9th tease that Willow and Drew are walking a razor-thin line between morality and rebellion. Between endurance and uprising, and they're done waiting or tolerating even one more moment. What was once pain, silent suffering, and emotional turmoil is now being transformed into fuel for a political and emotional strike of explosive magnitude, a recalibration no one saw coming. But one that is quickly becoming inevitable in Port Charles. This is no longer the gentle, fragile Willow who tried to keep the peace. No longer the kind-hearted Drew who always put others first. Now, they are two warriors clad in cold armor, ready to do whatever it takes to expose those who have trampled on the values and fragile peace they once tried to protect. It all begins when Willow uncovers a series of revelations that could unravel her entire family: falsified medical records, recorded phone calls, and potentially forged legal documents concerning custody of Wiley and Amelia. But more than that. She begins to suspect that Carly, the mother-in-law she once trusted, may have interfered deeply in Michael's medical recovery. Perhaps even deliberately altering test results to hide a truth that Willow had every right to know. As these murky puzzle pieces begin to fall into place, something inside Willow snaps. She can no longer play the role of the silent wife, the patient mother, the passive woman watching others dictate her life. No. This time, she will rewrite the story, and Drew is the only person who understands her deeply enough to help make that happen. Drew. After a long period of internal conflict between his ethical values and harsh realities, has finally accepted one truth: if you want to survive in Port Charles, sometimes you must become part of its game. He tried to avoid becoming another Sonny, hoped to maintain a noble heart amidst the dirt of power plays, but now, seeing Willow crushed by forces cloaked in moral righteousness, he can no longer stand by. To Drew, the punch they're about to throw isn't just about justice, it's about redefining what justice means on their terms, after being betrayed too many times by a system never built for people like them. They're not merely preparing to confront Carly or Sonny, they're targeting the entire power structure operating behind the scenes. Willow may be holding medical documents that expose illegal tampering in Michael's medical files, something that could not only destroy Carly's reputation but also jeopardize Michael's custody rights, if brought before the court. Meanwhile, Drew is tracing concealed financial movements tied to Aurora shares and funds disguised as medical sponsorships, which in reality were hush payments. If these two fronts are joined together, no one, not even Sonny, will be able to prevent a full-blown crisis. But the real shock isn't in what they're doing, it's in why. Willow isn't acting out of rage, but deep emotional betrayal, betrayal from those she once trusted with her life. She's not furious at Carly for a single lie, but for being betrayed throughout her recovery after facing death itself. She's not rebelling because she lost control. She's fighting because she finally realized she's the only one who can reclaim it. And Drew is no longer the man trying to please everyone. Now, he wants to protect Willow, reclaim what they lost, at any cost. This recalibration, from psychological to strategic, pushes everything further than ever before. Willow is no longer sitting in the chapel praying for forgiveness. She's quietly contacting lawyers, journalists willing to uncover the truth, and even preparing a complete case to submit to the hospital board to trigger an internal investigation. Drew, as a major shareholder and influential businessman, is manipulating shareholder meetings to eliminate Carly and Sonny-aligned allies, even medical staff involved in the cover-up. Together, they are now a dangerous alliance, not because they carry hatred, but because they've lost their fear. And when people no longer fear, they become unpredictable. Willow, with a fractured heart, now leads a new undercurrent, a silent revolution meant to unearth buried truths. Drew, once hesitant between right and wrong, now holds the final card that could tear off the mask of the powerful. This isn't just a twist, it's an earthquake. And the punch Willow and Drew are about to deliver won't just shake a few individuals, it could shatter the seemingly untouchable power structure of Port Charles. A new, darker chapter is beginning, not written in blood, but in truth. And when it hits, no one can say they weren't warned. Meanwhile, Tracy's story is slowly emerging like an underground storm, a fury compressed within the bitter silence of a seasoned, strategic woman who never suffers humiliation without striking back. Tracy, with her icy gaze and calculated steps, is entering a new chapter, one of vengeance, of reclaiming control over what she believes is rightfully hers. And her war is now aimed squarely at Drew. Behind polite dinners and half-joking barbs lies a simmering anger, not from material loss, but from being deceived, belittled, excluded from decisions where she should have been central. To Tracy, Drew is an outsider who dared step into the power domain of her family, a man who was given a chance, then used that position to commit what she sees as betrayal. To Tracy, power is not something to be shared with the ambiguous, the morally ambivalent, and certainly not with those who dare challenge her with pity or ethical sermons. Drew's recent corporate moves. His growing closeness with Willow, whom Tracy suspects is hiding something dark, have only deepened her sense of threat and insult. She no longer sees Drew as a useful piece in the family game, but as an intruder cloaking himself in morality to erode a foundation she spent her life defending. Tracy's strategy doesn't stem from fleeting anger, but from a clear understanding of her enemy. She watches Drew, his words, alliances, investments, strategic decisions, and memorizes every weakness to exploit. She doesn't need to make open threats, she instills fear with a glance. Unsettles enemies with veiled remarks. And now, as she realizes Drew is inching deeper into her family's financial territory, possibly aiding Willow in a covert plan, she decides it's time to act. A war must be triggered, and she will lead it. Amid Port Charles's rising tension, hidden truths, and fragile alliances, Tracy is quietly re-establishing her dominance. She's rekindling old relationships, calling in favors long owed, and dangling tempting investments to lure former Drew loyalists to her side. She doesn't need to barge into Aurora or hurl accusations, she only needs to whisper to the board that Drew is losing control. That he's entangled in shady ties. That he may be keeping secrets capable of damaging the entire corporation if exposed. And while Drew is busy shielding Willow, Tracy is quietly pulling the rug from beneath him, inch by inch. To Tracy, this battle isn't just about victory, it's about engraving a message: never underestimate a woman like her. No one, not Drew, not anyone, can cross her and walk away unscathed. Tracy's revenge isn't loud, but it's deep, prolonged, and devastating. And most dangerous of all, she doesn't fight for emotion. She fights for principle, pride, and honor she believes is under grave threat. Change is peaking, and when Tracy strikes, every power in Port Charles will feel the tremors. Drew may not yet grasp the gravity of what's coming. But the storm has formed, and its name is Tracy, a woman who never starts a war she doesn't intend to end in triumph. And this time, she doesn't just want to defeat Drew, she wants him to feel every crack in the foundation of status, reputation, and pride he once used to stand against her. A new obsession is rising. A dark chapter unfolding, and at its center is Tracy, ready to pull everything into her final game. The event of Sasha giving birth seemed like a faint glimmer of light piercing through the years of darkness that had enveloped her life. When a healthy baby girl was born, Port Charles believed that finally, a painful chapter in Sasha's story had come to a close. But they were wrong. Very wrong. Because behind the newborn's first cry was not peace, it was the opening note of a storm that would soon consume everything. This was not just a sacred moment. It was the spark igniting a series of tangled, haunting events, as the true identity of the baby's father remained a secret buried under layers of silence, lies, and fear. And while Sasha clung to the fragile moment of holding her daughter, Jason was heading down a very different path, a journey to reclaim a truth he believed had been stolen from him. And at the same time, a quest to restore his own sense of honor. Jason is not someone easily deceived. But in this story, Sasha's silence, the woman he once trusted, left him no choice but to question. Her disappearances during pregnancy, her refusal to meet or take a DNA test, all now seem to point to one possibility: she is hiding something. Not because she doesn't know who the father is, but because she knows exactly who he is and chose to keep that truth to herself. Jason has always lived by the principle of never letting emotion override reason. But this time, it's different. He cannot accept being cut out of the life of a child he suspects might be his. And as suspicion grows into fury, Jason begins to act. He is no longer the cold man standing at the emotional sidelines. Jason is now on a mission for truth. From hospitals to law firms. From labs to the homes of those who interacted with Sasha during her pregnancy, Jason is on the move. He secretly commissions private paternity tests, collects cellular samples from personal items, and even, according to some sources, resorts to illegal methods to obtain medical records, something previously unheard of in his history. These actions are pushing Jason into a moral gray area, where he is willing to accept legal consequences just to confirm one thing: is the baby his? Sasha, though physically fragile after childbirth, can feel the mounting pressure closing in. She's no longer able to hold her child in peace without wondering who will knock on the door next. Jason's lawyer? A reporter? A social worker? She knows the truth, but revealing it would trigger a chain of consequences she may not be able to control. Is Jason truly the father? And if so, why did she hide it? The answers lie deep within secrets only Sasha knows, and that's what makes this obsession more brutal than any custody battle Port Charles has ever seen. What few people know is that during her pregnancy, Sasha was threatened. Someone, still unidentified, approached her and demanded she keep the baby's father's identity a secret in exchange for her child's safety. At first, she thought it was an empty threat. But when she received a photo showing her car being followed, she realized it was no joke. That's why she pushed Jason out of all decisions related to the baby, not out of hatred, but out of fear. But now, with the child born and Jason breaking through all barriers, she knows the truth cannot stay buried forever. What Jason and Sasha are undergoing is not just an emotional shift, it is a restructuring of the entire power dynamic surrounding this child. Port Charles now faces a new reality, that this small, innocent life carries the blood of a hero and a survivor, and is at the center of a legal, moral, and media war that will echo far beyond expectations. Authorities are getting involved. Sasha's former lawyers are resurfacing with their own agendas. Friends who once stood by her are now keeping their distance, waiting to see how she handles this unraveling. And Jason, no longer a man lurking in the shadows, has stepped into the light, making it clear that he will not let anyone, not even Sasha, stop him from doing what's right. The baby girl remains unnamed. In hospital documents, she's listed only as Baby Girl Gilmore. But everyone knows that name won't stay. Because if Jason proves the truth, that child will carry another surname, one tied to power, legacy, and darkness, Morgan. And when that moment comes, not just Sasha, but all of Port Charles will be forced to reckon with a new order, where one innocent child becomes the center of hidden ambitions, unresolved grudges, and irreversible choices. The question is no longer, who is the father, but who will control the truth, and what price are they willing to pay for it? Jason is getting closer to the truth every day. And each step shakes everyone connected to Sasha's past. Like a creeping shadow, the obsession with the child's true identity is spreading, quietly consuming everything once stable. In this world, no one is innocent. Nothing is permanent. And the baby, the most innocent of all, is now caught in the most haunting power game Port Charles has ever seen. Curtis has finally begun to act, not in silence like a bystander, but with the cold calculation of a man pushed to his limits. A man who refuses to be manipulated or left behind in the secrets and control games he's too familiar with. But this isn't just about Curtis getting angry. It marks the beginning of a new phase, a deep recalibration in how he sees the world around him, and how he approaches relationships he once considered untouchable. These changes didn't erupt in one explosive moment, they are the accumulation of months of betrayal, deception, and dismissal. And as Curtis decides to step out from his own shadow, everything begins to shift. What Curtis is doing is no longer reactionary. He's acting with chilling precision, step by step, like a man rebuilding the board to play by his own rules. He starts investigating what's been overlooked, from murky hospital financial contracts to covert ties between power players like Drew, Jason, Sonny, and even those close to him like Portia and Jordan. With his background as an undercover agent, Curtis lacks no skill in tracing forgotten paths. But this time, he's not driven by duty, he's driven by a desire to reclaim control, not just for himself, but for everything falling apart around him. One of the biggest adjustments Curtis faces is a complete reevaluation of those around him. Portia is no longer the trusted wife. Jordan is no longer just a past he can forget. In the past, Curtis operated in gray areas, never fully trusting, but never fully doubting either. Now, he wipes that away. He begins categorizing clearly, who tells the truth, who hides it. And in doing so, a new wave of pressure is born, not from others, but from Curtis himself, aimed at those who underestimated him. This pressure doesn't take the form of violence, it's psychological, pressing down on those who thought Curtis would never push back. He demands access to internal records. He calls in lawyers. He publicly questions leadership during hospital board meetings. He forces those who once tried to manipulate him to face the mirror of truth. Curtis, once seen as a calming presence, is now the cause of sleepless nights. And this transformation is sparking a fresh wave of anxiety in Port Charles. Even unrelated figures are growing uneasy. Marshall, his father who once fought to earn Curtis's forgiveness, now worries his son is spiraling into a trap. Trina, still trying to rebuild family bonds, feels the growing distance from a stepfather she once trusted. Even power players like Valentine and Nina are watching Curtis warily, because they understand one thing. When someone who has been deeply wounded chooses to fight back, they become a force beyond control. Every decision Curtis makes now carries weight, not just for himself, but for the entire structure of power in Port Charles. The question is no longer, what will Curtis do, but who will be affected next? Some say Curtis is going too far, becoming what he once despised, a man using personal power to control others. But others, especially those who've seen him suffer, believe this is the first time Curtis is truly living as himself, a man no longer asking for respect, but demanding it through action, truth, and if necessary, confrontation. One of the new strategies emerging is Curtis gathering intelligence to shift the balance of power. He's no longer just a business owner or a grieving father. He's becoming a strategist. His actions could open the door to a new wave of crises, from hospital scandals to shady investments at the Savoy, and even investigations that may threaten the lives of key figures. And if Curtis continues down this path, he won't stop until the truth is revealed, and those who once disoriented him will be forced to pay the price. This recalibration is irreversible. Curtis is no longer the man he once was, and Port Charles must brace itself for a coming tide, with him at the center. This isn't a recovery. This is the beginning of a confrontation. And the real obsession begins the moment Curtis raises his head, looks his manipulators in the eye, and smiles. Jason is being pushed into an unprecedentedly dangerous situation, where the cold, controlled exterior that had long helped him survive the chaos of his past is now beginning to crack under the weight of secrets, betrayals, and truths so distorted they are barely recognizable. He was once a man who knew no fear, a silent warrior who walked in the shadows to protect those he loved, willing to sacrifice everything without asking for recognition. But now, he has become the target in a sequence of events that seem premeditated, where every move he makes is watched, every decision is suffocated, and every secret he tries to keep is being peeled away layer by layer at a speed he can no longer control. Jason is no longer the one moving the pieces, he is a pawn, being drawn into a game in which even he doesn't know who's pulling the strings. The danger he now faces is not just physical, though the anonymous calls, shadowy figures near his home, and unfamiliar cars tailing him at night are very real, but even more perilous is the shift in how the world perceives him. He is no longer the silent protector in the eyes of Port Charles, but is increasingly seen as a man with secrets, a man entangled in forces far beyond the understanding of ordinary people. The name Jason Morgan no longer brings reassurance, it now triggers suspicion. Classified files about his past with the WSB, his unexplained absences from town. And now his unexpected connection to an ongoing investigation with Jocelyn's name at the center. All of it has clouded his once solid image, making him appear elusive, dangerous, and isolated. Meanwhile, Sasha, the woman who just gave birth under the most chaotic circumstances imaginable, is the one Jason wants to protect with everything he has left. But the reality surrounding them is making that almost impossible. Alone, exhausted, and facing legal pressure over the true paternity of her child, Sasha seems to be fighting her battle in solitude. While Jason is swept into a darker, larger storm. He can't be by her side during the critical moments. He can't stop the suspicious looks cast her way in custody hearings. He can't prevent reporters from tracking down her recovery location. And he can't silence members of the medical staff who are beginning to question her fitness as a mother. Everything is collapsing faster than Jason can react, and each time he turns his back to confront one threat, another one appears, this time aimed directly at the woman he's desperate to protect. At the same time, Jocelyn, once like a daughter to Jason, once the focus of his most important decisions, has suddenly become the epicenter of a secret leaking faster than he can contain it. Classified documents detailing her involvement with a covert WSB operation during her absence from Port Charles are being released piece by piece. As if someone is playing a game of chess and Jason isn't allowed to see the whole board. The documents describe a secret mission in Southeast Asia, where Jocelyn is suspected of acting as an intermediary in an arms deal, something she should never have been part of, something no one was ever supposed to know. Something Jason thought he had erased months ago. But the truth is surfacing, not because of Jason's carelessness, but because someone is deliberately exposing it, with strategy, precision, and unmistakable vengeance. Jason begins to realize he is no longer defending, he's falling into a trap. Every reaction he makes is misinterpreted. The media manipulates the narrative. Friends grow silent. Allies hesitate. Carly, who once stood by him unwaveringly, is now questioning him in private conversations and no longer defends him publicly. Sonny keeps a noticeable distance. No longer shares sensitive intel, no longer extends full trust. Jordan and Max Scorpio are under federal pressure to launch an independent investigation. And Jocelyn remains silent, neither confirming nor denying anything, making all of Jason's efforts to protect her feel futile. He no longer knows who's a friend, who's a threat. He doesn't know which arrow will come from behind. And worse, he's no longer sure he can stay intact. The obsession begins not from outside, but within the mind of a man who once had control over everything. Jason starts to question everything, every person he once trusted. Every decision he once believed was right, and even the man he thought he knew himself to be. There are nights he cannot sleep, not from fear, but because the loyalty he's held so fiercely is becoming a weapon turned against him. He doesn't fear death, but he fears being forgotten, being misrepresented. And the pain of seeing those he loves suffer because of secrets he kept with good intentions. Now, Jason stands on the brink of collapse, a man surrounded by secrets, facing the threat of indictment. Abandoned by friends, lured by enemies into the dark, and betrayed by the very ideals he once lived by. While Sasha is spiraling toward a custody loss, Jocelyn's silence grows deafening. And Port Charles slowly turns its back, Jason finds himself completely alone. He doesn't know when the storm will end, but he knows one thing with absolute certainty. If he doesn't act, if he doesn't uncover who is behind all this, then this time, it won't just be him who falls. Everything he ever fought to protect will vanish. And the new obsession, the thing that's consuming Jason Morgan, is not the darkness ahead, but the blinding light of truth that is burning him alive from the inside, day by day.